day of our Business and Markets Week. Welcome, everyone, to your definitive Business Morning, live here on Channels Television, Nigeria's news leader. We're live to you today, all still from Abuja, the country's political capital. We're now 24 hours behind us as far as the MPC decisions was concerned. Nigeria decided to leave its interest rate unchanged, so we got a few reactions coming through from within and outside the country. Welcome, everyone, to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I am Bosun Omofai. Let's get this from the London-based Exotics Capital. Says, issued a 5-page report overnight, says, quote, we believe a rate cut as early as July is likely. Yesterday, the revamped Monetary Policy Committee decided to leave all key interest parameters unchanged, including the asymmetric corridor. Now, Exotic Capital says they expect Nigeria to go for a rate cut as early as July. Some of the expectations that this should happen at the next meeting, which will be next month. Meantime, Exotic Capital says the rate cut, however, is not likely to happen until the rate of inflation is close to 12%. Right now, we have inflation at about 14.3%, MPR at 14%. And if you were on the program yesterday, you would have heard that the way to do this is to allow inflation get much lower, then you can begin to do rate cut. Exotic Capital analysts went on to say that inflation, however, will not, or Nigeria's inflation will not hit that level of 12% this year, despite optimistic claims of single-digit inflation from the central bank. That's the latest as we're looking at this analyst report this morning, that Nigeria's inflation may not hit 12% before the end of the year, and that might make rate cuts difficult for the new Monetary Policy Committee. Meantime, the report went on to say, however, that, quote, we suspect political considerations will play a major role in MPC decision making. In other words, if inflation failed to go to at least 12%, below the current level of MPR at 14%, then if the MPC will cut rates, that might happen based on political considerations. The Exotic Capital says they suspect political considerations will play a major role in MPC decision making. We have the next meeting to give us an idea how the MPC will decide. However, there's a little bit of a sympathy for the Monetary Policy Committee, headed, of course, by the chairman, the governor of the central bank himself, and the analyst at Exotics Capital says, quote, we do not envy the position that the Nigerian MPC is currently in. And why? Because it's fighting inflation. There is high unemployment and stagnant growth. So there's a bit of a sympathy there. So it's not a very enviable position to be battling all these economic problems, dilemma, whatever it is, and try to cut interest rates with a clarion call for a rate cut. Meantime, Exotic Capital says these challenges, which include inflation, high unemployment, stagnant growth, will not be fixed through the MPC's decisions alone, and will require vast structural changes across the economy. And that sounds like what we've heard 1,000 times. There's a need to revamp the economy. There's a need to make what we call structural changes. Now, the analyst says the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank cannot do that job alone, and those challenges will require vast structural changes across the economy. We'll have some discussion on this a little bit later today. Meantime, the Buhari's administration is moving forward with a brand new agenda. It's called economic diplomacy. This is the first time that any Nigerian administration will formally unveil what it calls an economic diplomacy. So today, the 5th of April, President Buhari will formally unveil the country's first ever economic diplomacy program that looks to engage the global community on trade, investments, and the economy. What's Nigeria's economic diplomacy really is? No one really has an idea what that is. Now the government is under the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and the Nigerian Office of Trade Negotiations have put this together, and the president will sign that off today. And that is one very big economic event taking place today in Nigeria, unveiling what you call an economic diplomacy. What that really means in practical terms, we'll have all the time from tomorrow to discuss that. And that's something you want to be on the lookout for. Meantime, we have the green bonds, and that is one thing we need to talk about very quickly. We got words through sources yesterday that the Nigerian authorities now looking set to float the green bond that's been talked about for the last 2 years on the 10th of April. That should be coming through sometime next week. That's what sources told Business Morning yesterday afternoon. So now Nigeria is looking to retain that pioneer status to be the first sovereign green bond issuer in sub-Saharan Africa. And that is something that we expect that to happen at the stock exchange on the 10th of April if the sources we had is very correct. But just before we take the markets, let's roll back a little bit to the MPC. One of the high points of yesterday's communique read by Godwin Emefiele, the head of the central bank, and of course the chairman of the committee, has to do with the distribution of FAC, what you call the Federal Account Allocation Committee. And of course, just to remind you what that communique says yesterday, the committee says they observed the increasing monetization of oil proceeds as evident in the growing FAC allocations or distributions relative to 2017 level of disbursement. In other words, the rising oil prices, nearly $70 a barrel, and monetizing that and sharing that between the federal, states, and local government is worrisome to the Monetary Policy Committee at the Central Bank. So they asked to advise the government to